Now we're going to have the discussion on distress tolerance, parental superpowers, and that's going to be with Dr. Lucine Wisniewski and Laura Collins. So Lucine is a clinician, trainer and researcher whose interests centre around using empirical founded treatments to inform clinical practice. Lucine is an adjunct assistant professor of psychological services at Kate Western Reserve University. She has taught more than 150 workshops, lectures and presentations on cognitive behavioural and dialectical behaviour therapies. That is a mouthful, thank you. Internationally, she has over 40 publications and peer-reviewed journals and invited book chapters. I'm feeling like an underachiever reading this, Lucine. Lucine has been elected fellow, has served on the board of directors and is the co-chair of the Borderline Personality Disorder Special Interest Group of the Academy for Eating Disorders. In 2013, the Academy of Eating Disorders awarded Lucine the Outstanding Clinician Award to acknowledge her contribution to the field of eating disorder treatment. She is the owner and founder of the Centre for Evidence-Based Treatment in Ohio, which offers therapy, training and consultation in evidence-based approaches to mental health conditions via traditional and teletherapy platforms. Now, I know Lucine likes to play tennis, especially with her family in these isolated times. If there's something else you'd like to share with us when you come on, that would be fantastic. Laura Collins Linstermesh I have got her down as the founder, that's my understanding, and is the executive director of F.E.A.S.T. She is an American writer who became an activist for improved eating disorder treatment after her teen daughter recovered from a life-threatening eating disorder. Her book, Eating with Your Anorexic, is a humorous memoir of her family's experience. Laura is an affiliate member of the Academy for Eating Disorders and a recipient of the 2014 Meehan Hartley Award for the public service and/or advocacy. She has helped to found 3 eating disorder advocacy organisations. I'm feeling like an underachiever again, guys. F.E.A.S.T, Charlotte's Helix, and Maudsley's Parents. She has written 4 books, 2 on eating disorders. In her leisure time, and I would love to see this, she tap dances and watches very old movies. Just to the audience, just a reminder that you can put questions to the panel. We will do our best to get to them. And the question panel can be found by running your cursor over the bottom of the Zoom window, and you'll see an icon that says Q&A. If you click on that, and the question panel will come up. Can you also keep an eye on the chat panel attendees, because our technical team, the amazing team, will put some tips up there from time to time on how to optimise this experience. Over to you, Lucine and Laura. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So I'm going to go first. Let me share my slides. We're talking about distress tolerance, and it kind of speaks to what the last presentation got to, which is, yeah, food is medicine, but how do you deal with the distress that your person is experiencing during that, and how do we respond as parents? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've learned as a parent advocate, and Lucine's going to share more of a clinical view. And between the two of them, I hope it will be helpful. We all know that eating disorders cause enormous distress. Recovery requires facing and even increasing distress for a while to be successful. So it helps me to look at tolerating distress as active and powerful instead of weak and passive. Distress is anxiety, sadness, inability to focus, shame, anger, all these really distressing, strong emotions that threaten to overwhelm our person and ourselves. So, we all of us, all the parents here know what that's like. And as parents, we are highly sensitive to our children's distress. And that also makes us very important teachers in tolerating distress and being resilient. So the first thing that comes to mind when I talk to a parent is that you've done this. You have done this before. We are parents, and the chaos of the illness tends to rob us of our confidence and trick us into believing that this problem is beyond us and that our loved one is different because they're not a toddler anymore. But you have done this. You have dealt with inconsolable, irritable, frightened, unhappy people that were your children, and you've done it before. You know how. It was your job. And it is your job again. And I'm going to try to convince you that this situation, we got to bring back those skills. I also want you to know, and I've talked to countless families, that you are way more powerful than you think you are. The eating disorder has knocked your family over. It's made you doubt your parenting. And this unhappy person in front of you just really doesn't seem to trust you or like you anymore. The emotions are very strong, very real, and you think it's beyond you. But you are not alone. We all feel that way. And all that anxiety that shoots down our confidence and our sense of reality is it looks like it's too strong, but you actually have more magic. That's why I use the slippers there. The eating disorder doesn't want you to feel confident, and it doesn't know that you don't actually need your person to say anything or do anything. Your person really just needs to know that it doesn't matter what you say or they say, that you as the parent are strong, you're resilient, and you're not going anywhere. That's what they need to know. And that is a power that no one else has. No other adults in your person's life can play that role. None of the professionals can play that role. No other family members, siblings, grandparents, nobody has that role that you uniquely have. So don't let the eating disorder convince you that this is beyond you. In fact, it is you for a reason, because you have this relationship and you've had it since they were little and they feel it inside. You don't know your power, but you have to believe in it. It's not magic. It's the truth that anxiety and the eating disorder are trying to keep you from seeing. My first lesson in distress tolerance was when I read the book, Nancy Zucker's book, Off the Cuff. Email me and I will send you a link for that. It's also on our website. I learned about staying off the emotional wave. Before I learned that visualization, I thought I was pretty good at handling my kids' emotions. I considered it normal to feel and act more emotionally as my children's anxiety and emotions rose. I went with them. And it seemed kind of uncaring to remain calm and unruffled when my child was in escalating distress. And then I had a bad habit where I would escalate my anxiety as if my stronger emotions might outpace theirs, and they would calm down. Also did not work. When I learned to stay on shore, and it was something I had to practice, where my kids were rising up on a wave of emotions, I built up my ability to stay calm and on the shore with sympathy, but not empathy. And I had to maintain that so that my kids would know that I knew that their emotions were not going to break them, that I would be there to comfort them when they came back, and I would not be exhausted by fighting the wave with them. And it took practice, and I was shocked at how well it worked. I did fake it a little at first. It's okay to fake it a little, because my confidence grew as it turned out that I was better and better at it. And that unflappable stance was something that my kids needed, and I didn't know it. In the movie Jurassic Park, I'm sure you've probably seen it, the velociraptors, that's not a velociraptor, but the velociraptors did this thing. They kept testing the fences. They would touch the electric fence. They weren't stupid or masochistic. They were testing the fences because what they needed was that one chance that the electricity was off. They had to test for that one time. And anytime the electricity was off, it just trained them to keep testing the fences. So anxiety makes our person keep testing fences. If they find that there are times that they can get through, they will be compelled to keep testing the fences. But here's how I look at it. It's our job to help them trust that the fence is on, that we're in charge. But our job is not to keep them from testing it. At first I thought, well, if I do this right, they won't test the fences. And anytime they did test the fences, that I was failing. No, let them test the fence. There, you are showing them that they are safe to give in to what you are telling them they need to do. Your person doesn't really actually want to escape. They want you to keep strong boundaries, no matter how strong what they say is, no matter what their behaviors are. They need to know that they are safe with you telling them no, with you putting boundaries on it. And they can't tell you that. and they may not understand it, but keeping fences strong is protective, not restrictive. And don't listen to the velociraptors. So one of the questions is it their distress that's going on, or is it ours? And those become really connected. And I know Lucine's going to talk about that with the DBT, but when our kids are upset, why wouldn't it upset us? I mean, that's just, we're connected. These are our loved ones. But it gets harder in times of high emotion to tell the difference between their feelings and ours. And it can be very helpful to identify which is their emotion and which is ours. Their distress is their job. Our distress is our job. It is not their job to make us feel better. We can endure their strong emotions without fixing it. And we can let them be in anguish without fixing that thing. It does feel uncaring at first. And they might say to you, you don't care, you're not helping me, you're unfeeling, you're selfish. It's actually, let them say it. Our distress is ours to manage, not their business. Their distress is something that we're dealing with, but let us each have our own distress and keep it separate in your mind. It's a wonderful tool. And there are ways to learn that skill, but I'm just putting that out there. It's, again, a skill that takes practice. I'm a verbal person, I'm a writer, but words are overrated in a crisis. So the thing I hear most from families is, what do I say? How do I say it? And I believe, and I want to share this, is that I think that words are probably beside the point. We're very verbal, but we think the right words will do it. It's as if the words will have the magic to quell the emotions, to convince, to explain, to motivate. I have found over the years that when I talk to families, we all do better when we let the words go and not put so much importance in the words. If you learn to say, I love you, instead of, you have to do explaining. You burn yourself out. You'll strip your gears. Don't worry if your person is not transformed by your saying that you love them. They may say nasty things back, but it is my perception with my own children, with many families that I've talked to, and from recovered people who come to talk to me later, is that they felt it and they were rooting for us. But we thought that our words were so important, but they felt the real feeling that we had. So, our words maybe not be so important. I mentioned this before, but their emotions are not our job. It's okay if they're not happy. It is okay if they do not understand, if they do not want recovery. It is okay if they hate us. Our job is shepherding them safely to recovery and not to keep them happy. Of course, we want them happy in life. Happiness is nice, but happiness isn't something you can make someone feel. You can't require it of people. I like to look at this as that their emotions are like weather. The weather is there for us to observe, to be prepared for. We don't control it, but we do observe it, and we try to predict it. And we make, we learn from it. But recovery is really challenging work, and it isn't comfortable or fun. Storms happen. It may not be predictable, and the sun still comes up the next day. It's okay to keep the person safe, despite their strong emotions. Keep them moving forward with nutritional and behavioral and therapy goals with your team, and observe the patterns. It's a really easy trap to get caught in trying to win on emotions, to try to talk your person out of the logic of their emotion. They shouldn't feel that way. They shouldn't care about this. They shouldn't be angry at us. But it's really easy to turn this into a battle to be right. There is no right in this. Feelings are feelings. They're okay to feel, and no one wins a battle of emotion. It's a really strange concept, but very, very useful in the eating disorder world across the spectrum of eating disorders, by the way. I'm not talking about, one eating disorder here. But separating your person from their eating disorder is a really important concept. You are trying to get rid of the eating disorder and keep the person. But, we've raised this person with all their thoughts and feelings and personality, and we don't parse them up. But our person has a serious mental illness, and being able to see the thinking of the eating disorders and the voice of the eating disorder as separate is a really important tool to understanding their distress. And the distress is our real person, but we have to see the illness for what it is, and that it is causing the distress, not us. Align with your person, not their eating disorder. It can feel at times, we've all been there, that it can't get worse. Our exhaustion, our fear is almost paralyzing. But keep going. Standing still is not an option. There is no actual destination where you are. So you can't stop. You can't go back. You're going to need to break it into each task, each hour, each minute, and sometimes just do it breath by breath. I just got to get through this breath. The breaths add up. You can keep going, and you've done this all your life, and you'll do well. This is a very popular saying in the parent eating disorder community, is that if you're not getting flack, you're not over the target. Congratulations, your person is getting better, and now they're really angry. The truth is that may mean that you're doing it right, and you're going to have to take it, and you're going to have to see that you got to keep going. Your reward for turning things around with your loved one is that they're really, it's anguishing, it's difficult. But again, you can do it. They don't have to like it, and their displeasure may be the sign that you're doing well. This is one of the most important concepts that I've really learned from, is that the problem isn't the problem. So you have a loved one that you have been supporting and making feel better all their life, and you keep trying to fix the problem that they're talking about. I can't eat because X. This day is not a good day. It's the wrong temperature, the wrong color, the wrong tone of voice. You're not a good person. The shoes are not cruelty-free. The problem is not the problem. And if you keep running around trying to talk them out of feeling bad about that problem or fixing the problem, you're actually losing an opportunity to help them with their distress in a different way, which is helping them learn resilience and to their own distress tolerance. I think it's important to remember that some of us are born with it baked in. We have genetically more strong emotions about certain things, or there can be events in a person's life that can really increase their distress. But it isn't our fault. It isn't their fault. So it's very important not to be looking for causes as much as trying to build skills and resilience, and not to become about it being your fault, because that will distract you and keep you from doing your job. There is actually a design, and I think Lucine will probably talk about this in a second. There's a design to anxiety, and it gets worse if you deal with it in certain ways. And it seems like you're doing something wrong, but it's meant to get worse before it gets better. And you have to tolerate the distress of them going through this, and also we go through this. And this is a wonderful concept that, again, you can have my slides afterwards. I think before I close, I just want to say that loving parents are ideal targets for an eating disorder. If you're a loving, connected family, you make a really excellent target for anxiety, for splitting up the good relationship between the family, for appealing to our love and our desire to keep the peace. All families, functional, loving families, want a close family and will try to do things to preserve that. But that makes us also really good targets to have the wrong response. And our distress at trying to get these things can make us really good targets. But by the way, you're good parents. You're doing your job. It's okay. And you will get through this. And I think that's one of the most important things. And I just do want to say that there are a lot of ways, and none of them work for everyone, but what works in my family isn't going to be what works in another family, but there are a lot of tools out there. There are a lot of techniques. Lucine's going to talk about some of that, but just keep in mind, you're going to find your own solution, just as families do, and you're going to do a good job. And I really have seen so many families thrive when they were able to cope with their own distress and their kids' distress better. So this is really important. Thank you. Lucine.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, Lucine, we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I always love to listen to Laura speak because I learn so much about sort of the other side. I've been treating eating disorders now for almost 30 years. And when I train new therapists, I almost always make them read Laura's book because I think that as professionals, understanding the other side is so incredibly important. We can have our evidence-based treatments, but if we don't do them within the context of each individual family, like Laura was sort of saying at the end, there are many techniques, and what works for one family may not be what works for another. So my hope for my part of the talk, and I love the way that Laura thinks big too. Laura thinks big and sort of global and in concepts, and I'm a really practical thinker. I'm pretty linear and practical. And so hopefully what I'm going to do in my portion is to take some of the concepts that Laura has given you about, you know, whose emotion, whose distress, and give you some skills to be able to manage. So this is the title of my part of the talk is DBT Strategies for Dealing with Strong Emotions. So when we, okay. There we go. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, so I'll tell you just a little bit about myself in terms of my background. I was trained as a researcher originally back in the, I don't know, 1800s is what my daughter says. And I was trained predominantly in cognitive behavioral therapy for eating disorders. And then later in life, I learned FBT because it came around later. And then actually in between there, I learned DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. And the interesting thing to me is, you know, there are, and there's going to be a round table later today that talks about these different letters. It can feel a little bit like alphabet soup. And each of them has their own, you know, sort of sweet spot in terms of who they help and what kind of problem that they help. And DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, is a treatment that has a lot of focus on people with intense emotions and how do you manage intense emotions. So one of the components of what we teach in DBT is something called distress tolerance. So that's, I think, how Laura asked me to give this talk with her today, was from the angle of, okay, how do we teach parents? Because if you're dealing with, or even if you're not a parent, if you're a partner, if you have a loved one that has an eating disorder, by definition, you're going to be dealing with intense emotions, your own intense emotions and your loved one's intense emotions. And so the component of DBT that addresses those is what we call distress tolerance. So I thought we should talk a little bit about, let's get on the same page in terms of definitions, and then we'll talk more about strategies. So, but first you might wonder, okay, if this is a treatment for people with eating disorders or people with, you know, actually it was originally designed for people with borderline personality disorder and then adapted for use with lots of other different problems. But like, why do you need to learn these skills? And I might argue, you know, well, you might wonder for yourself, but I'm not the one with the eating disorder. I'm not the one with the problem. And as Laura said, and even in the first talk this morning, you as the loved ones, or you as the people who are there to try to help your person combat the eating disorder, you need to be tougher, smarter, and more skillful than the eating disorder, which is a tall order. And you're doing this in order to help your loved one. The metaphor that I like to use with families is, you know, you need to be like when you're on an airplane, although many of us can't be on airplanes right now, or we would be there in Sydney with you. But that, you know, when you're on the airplane and they tell you in case of turbulence, put on your oxygen mask first and then help your loved one, right? Because if you help your loved one first and there's any problem with that, you may be sucking wind, so to speak, and not be able to help as adequately. So these skills are skills for you, okay? But, you know, so then often when I'm teaching skills to parents, they say like, okay, wait, can I use these skills on my loved one? Can I use them to get her or him to do the thing that I want them to do? And categorically, I'm going to say no. No, you can't use them on your loved one. You can use these skills yourself with your loved one, okay? And you can be a role model. But I'm not teaching these to you so that you can be better at using them on your loved one, if that makes sense. It's a semantic difference, but I think it's very important that we are in this idea. The skills that I'm going to teach you are skills for you to learn so that you can put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you can help your loved one, and you're going to see why in a minute. And you're going to be teaching by example. You know, one of the things that I think is really interesting, you know, Laura had mentioned in her part of the talk that some people are just born by temperament with more intense emotions than others. And if you know, and there's, you know, positives and negatives to be somebody who has those sorts of intense emotions. And I would say I'm one of them. And if you're somebody who feels strongly about things, and your family of origin doesn't know how to teach you how to manage them, how are you supposed to learn to manage those emotions? Historically, people with intense emotions are told they're wrong and bad and too much and, you know, overreacting and all those sorts of pejorative answers. And so if you happen to be a parent who has those intense emotions, and then you have a child who has those intense emotions, you know, either biologically or because of you're asking them to do something that they don't want to do, like eat a cheeseburger, then, you know, we have to be able to help you to manage your emotions so that you can teach your child, if that makes any sense. So what are the goals of these distress tolerance skills? It's basically surviving a crisis. Okay, and the idea here is that these are short-term solutions to painful situations. These are not skills that are going to help you solve everything. Like it'd be really nice actually if I had a set of skills that I could say, all you need to do is learn this and everything will be fine. And then I'd win the Nobel Prize, but it's not happening. These are short-term solutions to painful situations. And the purpose of these skills is not to make the painful situation go away. It's to make the painful situation more tolerable. We want to help you be more skillful during that painful situation. And also, not only just be more skillful, but we also want to help you refrain from impulsive actions that make the situation worse. Because guess what? We're human. And I don't know about you, but you know, I have 3 kids myself. Hopefully they're not listening at this point because they're wandering around somewhere in the background. One of my children also has intense emotions. And historically, before I learned how to manage my own and I learned to teach him to manage his, it would go like this. He would have an intense response. I would have an intense response. We would ratchet each other up and be stuck in a death match where nobody would win and nothing good would come of it. And so in situations like this, we want to teach parents to be able to manage their emotions so that they didn't make the situation worse. I don't know if you guys can think of a situation, you know, the classic example would be, you know, you didn't do the thing you were supposed to do. Okay, now you've lost your phone for an hour, and then you would mouth at me, and then you would lose your phone for the rest of the day. And by the end of the conversation, he would have lost his phone for the rest of his life. This is not necessarily the way that you want to respond as a parent in a way that's effective. So we need to help you manage the painful situation without making it worse. And then there's another set of skills that we're not going to talk about, but just so you know, I wanted to be inclusive, is that it's not these distress tolerance skills that are part of DBT are also about accepting reality when we can't change it and when it's not what we want to be. And I wanted you to know that they were there because I think I see this happen with parents or, you know, with individuals who love someone with an eating disorder, not infrequently, like they just wish that it wasn't true. And it is. And sort of spending time wishing it wasn't true doesn't necessarily help you be effective or figure out how to manage it. So this is the notion of distress tolerance skills. So as I said, the goal of distress tolerance is to survive a crisis situation without making it worse. And it's the idea of keeping one problem to one problem. So what do I mean by that? So for example, if you're upset with your child for throwing food on the floor or yelling at you, things that are very common when someone is doing FBT. If you scream, yell, hit, throw food yourself, you are likely now to have more than one problem. Whereas if you were able to remain calm and your child threw food or yelled at you, you'd have one problem. But if you respond then with this kind of emotional response, you probably have more than one problem. And this is often what distracts families from the dealing with the eating disorders is these emotional outbursts among family members that then distract you from the real core issue. So when are we going to be using these crisis survival skills? Okay, so the idea is, number one, you might be feeling overwhelmed, but need to meet current demands. So what do I mean by that? So this is an example. You've walked into your house after a long day at work, expecting that your partner had made dinner and fed your child, and it didn't happen. And for whatever reason, your partner now has to leave the house. There's an emergency at work, something happened, they were going to go to the store, and now you need to do it. And so you're tired, you're aggravated, you're disappointed, and you're also not wanting to deal with having to make dinner and the upcoming fight that you imagine is going to happen because you're refeeding your child. This is a situation where you're feeling overwhelmed, but you still need to meet the current demands. Or you're having extreme arousal and the problem can't be solved immediately. This is another situation. And one of the situations I thought of that would give you an example of this is it's late at night and you found evidence of vomit in the bathroom after everyone's gone to sleep. You're not solving anything right then, but you've got to figure out now, what are you going to do? These to me are sort of classic examples of crisis situations where as the loved one, you've got to figure out how you're going to manage your own emotions. Now, while I was waiting, I drew this really lovely picture. So because I could not figure out how to do it in a neater, nicer way. So the eye here, this is a different curve than Laura was talking about. On the left, it says emotional intensity because I was writing sideways, and underneath is trigger. And the idea here is if you think about a crisis, so this trigger being either your finding the vomit in the bathroom or coming home and finding out that you now have to make dinner when you didn't think that was going to happen, that would be the trigger. And then this curve is the emotional response, right? One of the things that people often don't know, and so this is like psychoeducation around emotion management, is if you do nothing, if you literally do nothing, your emotion will increase, as you see here, peak at some point, and then decrease. It will come down. Now, those of us who are more intense, that time that it takes to come down takes a little bit longer. People who are not as intense, that curve may look a little bit more differently, but part of what we're trying to teach you in distress tolerance is how to manage during the time when it's really high before the emotion has started to come down. Because if we can help you be skillful during that time where the blue circle is, right, at the peak of that emotion, whether it be, and I'm going to teach you some of the skills, your emotions will come down and you are going to be more skillful. Okay. And so, again, no matter who you are, your emotion has to come down. Now, again, some of us, it takes 5 minutes. Some of us it takes 5 hours. But the skills I'm going to talk to you about are the ones that you use to help yourself while you're waiting for for the emotion to abate. So these are some examples this is just my overview of the DBT crisis survival skills. I'm going to teach them to you quickly. You will have access to these to my slides, but you can look up any of these. If you just type in DBT and any of the words that are here as the skills, you will get YouTube videos, you will get handouts, you will get Pinterest. You'll be amazed at how much is out there that you can educate yourself with. So I'm not going to review these because I'm going to review each one of these skills. So the stop skill, as it sounds, now DBT is big into acronyms to help you remember what the skills are supposed to mean. So the idea is if you're in that moment and you are, and I'm imagining, the individual who's found vomit in the toilet and it's midnight, everyone's asleep, and you're thinking now, okay, what do I do? We actually want you to stop. We want you to stop, take a step back, observe, and proceed mindfully. Because if you are at that peak of your emotion, you might do something like wake up your loved one or wake up the whole house, or, sort of move into action, where what you really need to do is slow yourself down and figure out what your next steps are. So this is what we call the stop skill. Stop, take a step back, observe yourself and your environment, proceed mindfully. Really think through what you're going to do. The other is pros and cons, right? Like your classic pros and cons. Now, the thing that's different about DBT pros and cons that I want to teach you as a secret trick is, so let's say you've stopped. We did what we said here, stop, take a step back, and you're going to proceed mindfully. And now you're deciding, well, what am I going to do? I want to wake her up and have a confrontation. Well, so then you might do the pros and cons. You might say, okay, I'm going to do the pros and cons of waking her up and confronting her right now. However, I'm also going to do the pros and cons of not waking her up and confronting her right now, because although I didn't give you examples of these, you'll see that they're not always the same. People sometimes think that the pros and cons of not doing the thing are the same as the cons of doing the thing, but it's not actually true. I highly recommend that, and remember, part of the deal here is we want you to be doing something in that blue circle to help you while you're waiting for that emotion to come down. Pros and cons are another good thing for you to be able to do during that time, to get yourself more clear about how you want to intervene and what you want your behavior to be. Tip is the next set of skills. Now, this is also one that is, remember, DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, was not originally designed to treat eating disorders. So there are some skills that are taught in DBT skills groups that have to be modified for use with people with eating disorders. So the tip skills, so I'm teaching you these, though, because I'm assuming that many of the loved ones of these individuals do not have eating disorders, and you could use these skills very effectively if you need. So tip skills is changing your temperature with cold water. It's like the idea of take a cold shower, taking cold water or ice water and putting it on your face. What that does is it actually decreases your heart rate. Because if you think about yourself at the top of that emotional wave, you're really activated, and we want to bring you back down so that you could be more clear about how to proceed. So tip is changing your temperature of your face with cold water, intense aerobic exercise. You can see where that would be a problem to prescribe that as an intervention for someone with an eating disorder. Paced breathing, which is kind of rhythmic breathing, and paired muscle relaxation, which again, if you don't know what these things are, is you can just type them into YouTube. There are a million examples that will teach you how to do both paced breathing and paired muscle relaxation. But they are physiological ways to calm the body down so that you can be more clear in your what happens next. Now, there's a couple things that I want to be clear about with people with eating disorders. Because the effect of cold water on the face is to reduce heart rate, and intense exercises increases heart rate, neither of these skills should be used by ED clients if they're medically unstable, right? If there is any kind of medical issue, you should not use these with people with eating disorders. You yourself can use them to manage your emotions. Now, if someone is medically stable, these are only used if they're okayed by their physician. So you want to bring it back to their physician and say, hey, is this safe to use with my loved one? So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. The nice thing about these tip skills is they reduce this emotional arousal very quickly. They can work in seconds, and they're very effective without much long-term negative. And some of them can be used without people knowing. So the paired muscle relaxation or the paced breathing, someone can do without it even being obvious. So these are, I think, can be really strategic skills. Okay, the next set of skills are the distract skills. So again, I'm not going to review each of these, but the idea here is there's an acronym and there's lots of things that you can do for yourself. So let's say you come home and you're the person who you thought you were going to be able to come home and just relax, and you find out now you've got to make dinner and feed your loved one and you've got a battle coming up. Okay, what can I do? Maybe I can leave the situation for a little while, mentally or physically, and give myself a break before I come back and start dinner, just to help me bring my emotions down, or to do something while I'm waiting for that emotion to come down. And activities, hobbies, or even things like listening to music or watching a TV show can be things that help people to have something to do while they're waiting for their emotion to decrease. Self-soothe is another DBT skill, which is the idea is doing a pleasant or comforting skill that provides relief from the stress or pain, and it makes it much easier to pass the time without making things worse. There's a whole list, again, of ideas of things you can do to be able to help yourself while you're waiting. So again, you could just type this into the internet, self-soothe, distress tolerance, DBT, and you will get this sheet. But again, I will share it with you. And then finally, improve the moment. And this is where sort of understanding, okay, this is the difficult situation I'm in. How am I going to tolerate it gracefully right now? And I mean, I feel like as I'm coming to the end of this part of the talk, you know, sort of addressing what Laura said earlier, which is which skill is going to work for you is going to be different than what's going to work for somebody else. And the nice thing is there are so many of these skills that you can pull from. And improving the moment to me is about managing the specific moment of the situation in a way. Some people use prayer, some people use relaxation, others are cheerlead themselves, but it's like, just get me through this moment to the next one, because when my emotions come down, I might be more effective. How do you know the skills are working? Well, time has passed and you haven't done anything to make it worse, right? Like I said, these are not skills that are going to make everything all better. There are skills where you're not going to make things worse. And this can be true even if you don't feel better. If you haven't made the situation better, the skills are helping. When you start to feel more able to tolerate the problem while using other skills is also a way that you know. And I hope that this has at least whetted your appetite for learning more about DBT and specific skills that you can help yourself so that you can better help your loved one. Now, when I said earlier, you can't use them on your loved one, but you can suggest them to your loved one. Hey, listen, you're looking pretty distressed right now. Why don't you go watch a TikTok and then come back and talk to me afterwards? So you can suggest it to them. You just can't use it on them. So I think those are the things I wanted to say. And I believe we have a little bit of time for questions if there are any. Is that right, Gordon?
It is indeed, Lucine. Look, thank you again, Laura and Lucine. Fantastic input. And to the extent I've been able to monitor the chat function and the Q&A function, some very supportive and appreciative comments coming in there. So just great work, guys. Thank you so much. I'll kick it off with the question. Look, we have only a few minutes. I'll let this go over time a little bit so we can at least try and get to one or two questions. But the first question that I've got here is, at what point does the stress tolerance become cruel? It can seem too harsh to see our loved ones threatening suicide or self-harm if forced to do what they are trying to avoid.
Can I address that one?
Please.
So I, as a parent who felt that way at first, I actually came to that transformed my fear of, being cruel. In a way, it was a bit of an abdication of my parental role. It isn't cruel to save someone's life. It isn't cruel to be calm and and unflappable in those moments. In fact, it is that superpower that I mentioned. You are the only one who can do it. And it's so important to our person that we do it, that we just can't abdicate that responsibility. We have to transform the way we look at it. You are not being passive. You are not being uncaring. You are being extremely brave and strong and parental. It is inherently parental. And there is a transformation where you go from one sense of it to another. And I remember feeling that way, but I remember how much more parental and confident I felt in myself when I transformed that to being being strong and protective instead of restrictive and uncaring. Lucine?
Okay. Yeah.
I suppose I think, as a medical professional, I think, well, although I'm not a medical doctor, I am a a clinical psychologist. The truth is, if I don't make my kid eat, they're going to die. And if I force them to eat and they tell me that if I force them to eat, they're going to kill themselves, I'm between a rock and a hard place. And I need professionals to help me differentiate where to put my attention and when. But I never think that asking someone who has an eating disorder to eat is cruel. I think it's the medicine. And sometimes people don't want to take the medicine that they know is going to help them for whatever reason. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't stick with it. Now, if you have someone who's telling you they're suicidal, you do need professionals to help you to differentiate that, because that does get complicated and confusing. And that's where DBT comes in. Sort of my area of research and interest is about helping people who are both have an eating disorder and are suicidal, because it can be complicated.
Okay, thank you very much. This is an opportunity, Laura, for you to clarify a point you made. Mariana says, what Laura says seems to be at odds with the food is medicine reality. The problem is not the problem. So I remember you saying the problem is not the problem. Would you like to elaborate on that for our audience?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I think that's what we think. That's what we think. The medicine is physiologically the medicine. The food's got to go in, and when we talk about how you are doing both things at the same time, but one is biological. There's just no way around the fact that the food is medicine, and dealing with that distress is part of their treatment too. But there's no way around it. It's like chemotherapy. Like we've discussed that in the food is medicine. If I'm getting your question correct, am I reaching it?
I think so, Laura, but maybe Mariana could perhaps come back on and let us know whether we've addressed that. Another question here from Teresa. We've been working with the team for 5 years now, but have never had a dietitian on the team. I requested one and was told that they don't have one on their team. They got one in for a once-off, but not sure if she had ever worked with an anorexic patient. I think the question came back later, should we get one privately? I certainly have a view on that, but over to the panel, please.
Lucine?
So the question is, no dietitian on the team, should they get one?
Yeah, I think that to me, it's very hard to give a specific recommendation. When I hear that someone's been ill for 5 years and you haven't been able to make progress, I would argue take a step back and go back to your team and ask for conceptualization of why they think your loved one hasn't gotten better before I would add a dietitian. Part of dietitians are fantastic, but there are some eating disorder patients who get very stuck on, I can't eat it unless the expert says it's so. And it can undermine the parent or the loved ones from refeeding. So I'd say, to me, the standout is 5 years, not gotten better. Go back to your team and ask them why they think it is, and ask them how they think it should be managed. And if they can't give you a good answer, I think it's time for a consultation with somebody else.
I want to add that for our family and for a lot of families I know, the dietitian, we as parents consulted the dietitian. We did not have our daughter seeing the dietitian. We needed those skills. We needed the dietitian skills and knowledge on the food and nutrition side. So, not having one on the team, it depends on what you mean by the team and who's using those resources. But I have found the skills of dietitians to be very important, but maybe not in the traditional way of having my daughter meet with the dietitian.
That's a great point, Laura. Great point.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye.